I was hired on October in 2011 at Mizzou Athletics to start what we called the Mizzou Network. And it was our online, on-demand channel, for lack of better words, for us to tell our own story and do some live streaming. And so I 2 full-time employees and a graduate student. And so we changed conferences. I was not a member of the Big 12 for very long. We moved to the Southeastern Conference, and then the SEC network idea kind of got floated out there. And so how many people here are sports fans? Let's see who I'm talking to. So we have a good number. So this is a good time of the year for sports with the NCAA tournament. The SEC network, we found out, so we had 0 control rooms, a reporter and myself and a graduate student, and that we were going to need to have a control room where we could produce content. And the idea was live streaming. And I'd like to give ESPN credit for having the idea of owning that digital space. I'm not sure if that's exactly what they were thinking. But so the first collaboration was the Southeastern Conference with ESPN to start a channel. And then ESPN then came to the schools, 14-member institutions, to start the SEC network. So some schools had varying degrees of control rooms and were doing perhaps video boards or something, some live streaming. But the idea is for all the content to look the same and everyone to produce neutral broadcasts that could go to the Watch ESPN app or Watch ESPN so everyone can consume these. So spring 2013, everyone kind of started getting these communications and that we'd have to build a control room so the schools could supplement the television of SEC Network. And so the launch, this is April 2014. This is in the beneath the student stands at Mizzou Arena down Tiger Avenue here. We just started our build. So the launch was going to be August. We were starting to build in April. I was very nervous, and I know ESPN was nervous. And so some of the other collaboration was me visiting other schools, seeing what they were doing, and we all worked together. And later this month, I actually was invited to Knoxville, where the University of Tennessee is, because ESPN was training all the schools on how to make it look like ESPN, even though we're branded SEC Network. That's an ESPN property. And so they were very worried about Missouri and what was going on, because this is what we had, and they couldn't come and train us. And so I went to Knoxville and talked to them and kind of reassured them that I had a plan, and then we were going to get there. So the network launched in August, and as Jim said, the most successful network launch, sports or non-sports. And that's a lot of that is behind the power of ESPN, obviously. 70 million subscribers at launch. And so first year, they kind of backed themselves up in just some headlines of what's going on. They delivered what they promised in terms of content. They were nominated for 3 national sports Emmys and Sports Business Journal's Best of Television, beat out only by ESPN. And so on the network level, or on the channel level, the linear channel, they did well, but the real trick was the collaboration between the schools and SEC Network. And so kind of how the schools work together, a lot of it was being able to use students. So my initial plan was to use mostly freelance talent and people I knew, but the number of events that we were expected to produce, it was really impossible unless you had a complete full-time staff that could do all that. So our first venture was some soccer, And we had what could only be described as a monsoon that came through on a Friday night. And the soccer match was delayed, and I'm in the control room thinking that, I'm paying all these people, this is a disaster. We ruined equipment. I think our switcher at one point, the monitor wall went green, if you've been in a control room. And so we kind of got through that first one. And so I kind of had no idea where we were going or what we were going to do. So one of the things I learned was what I call embracing the academy. Coming across the street here to campus and try to use more students and to be able to work with what we were doing. And so we started with some students that predated the SEC Network project with what we called Mizzou Network, and that was a handful of students. We had to figure out how to build that with more students. We found out that students, they're talented, energetic, they're available for the amount of events we needed to do. We started an internship class with the Department of Communication. Again, started a class with strategic communication journalism here to recruit. So right now, we're around 40 students that are involved in the SEC Network project. They run camera. They direct shows, they help produce shows, replay operators, associate directors, associate producers, stage managers, scorebug operators. All throughout the system, we utilize students to help us produce our events. We could not produce the volume of events we do without the student help. So first year, after that inauspicious debut at soccer, it turned out that the University of Missouri was asked to produce the most linear productions of any SEC school. And I was quite surprised, obviously, going from April, starting our build, to getting through year one was 14-15 school year of being asked to do the most productions for television. But really, what I found out later from ESPN is the whole project kind of hinged on one game that they asked us to do, whether they were going to utilize the schools to actually produce linear television. That was on November 16th, so 3 months after launch, they asked Missouri to produce a volleyball match. And so I will play you a clip of this just to kind of show you what we looked like then and what we were producing.
A winter wonderland in Columbia means we're approaching the volleyball postseason. Ole Miss is battling for NCAA tournament consideration. Missouri wants to build some mo as they hit the home stretch of the SEC schedule. Wall-to-wall volleyball on the ESPN SEC Network today. Third match of a triple-header features the Rebels and the Tigers at the Hearn Center in Columbia. Nothing there for the offense of Mizzou. Tough ball now coming in, and that's an easy finish for the Tigers. At the net, Toller with Ryder. They cap it off. Missouri wins the 5-set battle, 15-6. Over Ole Miss and jumps over them by half a game in the SEC standings. Tigers are a winner today. That's it from the Hearn Center. Up next, SEC basketball. Here in Columbia, Valparaiso taking on Missouri. We'll send you across the street for college hoops. That's next on the ESPN SEC Network. Tigers win it 3-2 at Hearn Center.
All right, so hopefully that looked like television. Because that match went well, ESPN actually, when they do linear television, they fly in talent and a producer and director. And so everyone was very happy with what we were able to do with them. And so that model kind of expanded. And so again, kind of my story is how we went from 0 control rooms to producing the most television of any school year one. And then that model that was going to be that digital content from the schools quickly turned to linear because of that game. And now the schools are producing the majority of linear television for everything basically except for football. So in football, the audience is so huge and the productions are so complex, they'll still pull television trucks for SEC Network. Now, ESPN will still bring a truck for the mothership of ESPN. The cumulative effect of 14 schools that are connected by fiber, spoken hub basically of Bristol, where ESPN is, and Charlotte, where the SEC Network offices are. Everything's connected, so everyone can work together. This is year one. More than 1,000 events produced by the schools in that digital space. You add that up with more than 500 linear productions on SEC Network, and that's a massive amount of programming content that's being delivered to the fan bases of the SEC and their schools. Looking to the future, each school in this connection, just to explain how things are done, also have a bureau cam room that can be controlled by Bristol and Charlotte, where you can set a coach or a player down and can be interviewed at any time. Just kind of a way everyone's working together. So now at the University of Missouri, I have 7 full-time employees, more than 60 part-time workers, many of them students, as I said, are working with us, and we're always learning to expand that. We will produce at least 145 events this year out of our control rooms, possibly going to over 160 events, depending on baseball or softball postseason. So you can imagine the amount of events that is jammed into about 9 months for us to deal with. But more importantly, the learning experience for students with what we do. They get their foot in the door, they learn a skill that's very valuable, as everyone probably knows, maybe not. Sports is one of those DVR-proof items that we still have, right? So you're going to watch that live, and this time of year, particularly with the NCAA tournament. And so that's very valuable in both the linear and digital space. And so these are jobs in the future for students. They get to work with ESPN professionals when they come in and we do these linear games. They can network. They get a leg up on jobs and internships. We've already had a student that completed an internship at Bristol last summer with ESPN, and another one slated to go this year. And quite honestly, it's an advantage for these SEC schools that are doing this SEC or this ESPN model in their own control rooms with ESPN. And there's also storytelling opportunities in many of our games. We will have time, if there's a halftime, to do a feature. And also SEC Network has a show where they utilize student-generated content. So it's not just live production that we can offer. What's happening is they're increasing the number of school control room games. And they also have the ability to be live at any time. So even when you're doing a digital game for that Watch ESPN app out of your control room, they do what they call whip around or bases loaded games. So for baseball or softball, where they just take an evening, usually a Friday night, and they just go from place to place depending on what's happening, kind of like that idea of goal line. And so last May, we were doing a softball regional, and we did, I think, 12 games in 3 days, and everyone was very tired. And there was one day we actually had a freshman who was setting and directing a game. And I was in the control room, and I looked up, and on ESPN2, our game was up and on. And I just thought, I'm not going to say anything to anyone right now that we had a freshman directing a game that's on ESPN2 right now. And also last spring, on a Friday, I got a call from SEC Network, and they had a rain out at Kentucky for baseball that night. And they said, hey, how would you guys like to be the national game tonight? And so normally, they would have their talent, their producers, but in this instance, because they trusted us and we were hooked via fiber to them, they just took our game and shifted it to the linear network. So we actually had our producers and directors and talent on the SEC network on a Friday night for baseball. So that kind of a unique opportunity for everyone. And so you can kind of see where that model is going with the SEC network. And so it comes time for questions.
So I think it's really amazing, and let it resonate for a second that with a staff of 6, Stan Silvey and his crew at the University of Missouri produce 160 live sporting events for the largest cable network offering, or the most successful cable launch in America. I think this model that they have built is truly, truly phenomenal. And then you think about the Missouri method and the fact that we definitely teach to learn by doing, right? And then you have a freshman directing, maybe not their directorial debut, but all of a sudden there they are directing a network program at the age of 19.
Right, and this freshman, she was actually from Florida, and she was looking at Florida and Missouri. And I toured the facilities at Florida. It's very nice down there. I have friends, some Missouri grads are down there working. And so her father called me in the spring of 14, and they were trying to figure out what to do. And I honestly, we hadn't started our build, so I had to be careful what I promised. And so it's turned out, I think, win-win for everyone. She's been a great student, and I think she's getting some unique opportunities. And certainly, we delivered on what I hoped we would deliver. I was not sure.
And we are having now sports brands, sports and entertainment being an interest in our journalism school. We are now having sports brands that are coming to us like Major League Baseball teams and the NFL and the like, and saying, bring us people who have our skills, who can translate quickly, who can do the things that we want to do, and who can do them in micro sort of ways. Small teams doing really powerful things. And I think that this particular, we had Chris Turner in here a couple of years ago talking about the formation of the SEC network and what was intended. And what I like about having Stan here today is he's telling you that not only did everything that they had planned to do work, but it is growing in leaps and bounds. Again, the expectation was that they would do 40 events, 40 or 30?
Well, everyone was required to do 40.
Yeah.
And then with the opportunity to do another 40, I believe, in that model. And so I think they were counting on 40 from each school. And the school, on average, produced 70 year one, and everyone's ramping up, and I know we are. And just like sports, in the SEC, it's very competitive, although very collaborative. Everyone's very nice. They help each other, but they still want to be the best. And I'm lucky enough to have a staff and have hired people that have come in that understand that and want to do that and want to be that, and I'm kind of relying on them. And this success really lands on my staff, but to want to come in and compete on that large stage with schools with, quite frankly, more resources, larger staffs, and better facilities. But the bottom line is, just like with sport, if you have a plan and execute it, you can be successful.
And in 15 months, basically had to build something that was not in existence and be ready for network distribution. And so kudos to you, and thank you for being here today, Stan Silvey, with the Mizzou Athletic Department.